Hey everyone, I'm Peter. I'm a professional brewer and avid home brewer, and today I'm going to review Joshua Weissman's How to Brew Your First Homemade Beer. First of all, I want to say I'm a huge fan, Joshua. All of your content is excellent, and all of your cooking stuff really inspires me to make better videos on YouTube. I'm brand new to YouTube, but I'm excited about this. Let's get going. Poured myself a beer, a home brew, to join along with you, but I'm excited to watch. Alright, let's get going.
Look, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really like beer that much. Yeah, probably not the best way to start this one out, but that's the exact reason why you should start brewing your own beer. I'll explain.
So, two things I noticed already. He is bottling, which is great for beginners. It's definitely the least expensive way to get started. And he's using a tulip glass, which I love tulip glasses. I think they're great for most beers. They really help keep a head on there and give you some good aroma, so that's great. His beer glass is maybe a little dirty. I can see there's bubbles forming on the bottom and sides, so maybe use a cleaner glass next time, but definitely stick with the tulip. I feel like I've watched a lot of Joshua Weissman. I'm not sure he's made a series out of Fermentation Friday, but if he has, I would love to watch a little bit more of it. Beer looks pretty. King of B-roll over here.
It is a Saison, aka a French farmhouse ale. It sounds super fancy, but in my opinion, it is the most perfect beginner beer to make, period. It's because the yeast that is used in this, you can do it in your own house at room temperature. This beer is gosh darn delicious. Now remember, you gotta be 21 years or older to be drinking.
So, I agree. Being able to ferment something at room temperature and not have something to control the temperature of your fermentation, like a fridge or a heat wrap, that can be inhibitive for a newbie. So a Saison is great because you can get a lot of good estery flavors, that's flavors from the yeast, at whatever temperature the room is. So most places you're going to have good fermentation, good flavor, even at just room temperature without control. So Saison's a great choice, and I think an underrated beer.
Drinking. So if you're watching this video and you're younger, hey, thank you. Don't forget to hit that like button, but do not drink any alcohol.
Very bad.
Now with that, let's go ahead and make this, shall we?
Now, before we get started, we're gonna need to talk about equipment. Not something I usually like to discuss, but it's important for this. Now, for the record, I will have a detailed document that has all this listed in the description. So let's just talk about the bare essentials. The main thing that you need is a fermenter, which will be a 6.5 gallon carboy, plus an airlock and a stopper.
Definitely airlock, stopper, crucial for brewing beer. If you brew in a closed container, it's going to explode. I also see that he's using a glass carboy, which is great. I started out with glass too. Helps reduce risk of infections, but for a beginner, I would maybe recommend plastic. There's a lot of really good plastic fermenters on the market that are cheaper and a little bit less dangerous. Glass carboys, if you try and move them around too much, or you just don't know exactly what you're doing, they can break, and not only will you lose your beer, but I've seen some bad accidents of cuts and scrapes with glass carboys. That being said, it's not a terrible option. I definitely started out with glass myself, so.
And then a large enough pot that can easily hold 5 gallons, a muslin grain sack to steep your grains, yes, sack is funny, and a racking cane. That's it. That's all you're gonna need. Beer brewers, if you're watching, we're gonna talk about hydrometers. Let's just
Thanks for the shout out, beer brewers.
wait for that, all right? So as a part of the recipe, I'm actually getting some sanitizer liquid prepared because the most important part to brewing is sanitizing. Every single brewer will tell you this. You must sanitize everything that the finished wort is going to touch, otherwise you risk some major health hazards.
Very true. Good point. I like that you're bringing that up, and I love your big container for just sanitizing everything.
Which, by the way, I'll explain what that is in just a moment. That same document in the description will also have a list of stuff that you need to sanitize just to help you out. Now, for the ingredients, you're gonna need a couple different grains that are just sort of cracked, and a lot of local homebrew shops will do this for you. I actually went to a local homebrew shop called Soko Homebrew, and they had all the grains that I needed, and they cracked them for me, and I literally just walked away with a sack.
That is a great point. Local homebrew stores are the best. I always try and buy from a local homebrew store as opposed to online where possible. And getting something fresh milled is great. And you don't even need to get the mill yourself, almost every homebrew store. This looks almost like every homebrew store I've ever been in. But all the good homebrew stores will mill your grain for you, and you can walk out and brew with it that day, and you got nice, fresh, cracked grain, and you're good to go.
Grains and did it. So I would really recommend looking for some local homebrew shops because it'll make your life a lot easier, but of course you can also get it all online. Last, the yeast that we're going to use is going to be W yeast 3711 French Saison yeast. Yeah, a lot of words. Don't try and use your sourdough starter, and don't use bread yeast for this. You need to use this specific yeast. The cool thing about this pack is it just makes it so easy.
I totally agree. Bread yeast, sourdough starter, although it's been done, that's much more experimental. If you're brewing beer for the first time, you have to use brewer's yeast. There's lots of different Saison yeasts, lots of different yeasts that you can use, but brewer's yeast for sure. Your local homebrew store will have some good options for you. Get back to it.
You just give it a little slap and then just let it sit out at room temperature for a few hours until it starts to puff up, and then you can use it. Now we're ready to actually make the beer. So you're gonna fill the grain sack with all these different cracked grains: 1.5 pounds of Belgian Pilsen, 12 ounces of German wheat, 12 ounces of aromatic wheat, 8 ounces of special roast, and 4 ounces of Cara Munich malt. Now, I know these are a lot of fancy terminologies, like they're literally just different types of grain. That's it. Now just tie off your sack, then drop your sack into 3 gallons of water that's been heated to 160 degrees Fahrenheit.
It looks like he's doing a partial mash extract brew. So that's where you steep some of the grains, and then for most of your fermentable sugars, you use dry or liquid malt extract, which is sugars from grains that have been boiled down and concentrated for you already. So I'm sure he'll add that in a second.
Make sure to dunk it in and out to make sure that it's hydrated, and let it steep for 1 hour, maintaining that temperature. Make sure to check.
What he said was right. Get it up to about 160, let it settle there, make sure it's not above that, and then let it soak for some time between 145 and 156. The temperature showed after he put the grains in that it was still at 165. That's probably too hot. You might get some tannins, some flavors that you don't really want, but you also may compromise any of the sugars or flavors that you're going to get from that grain. So just be careful. It looks like he probably ended up with a fine product, but go a little lower. There's a specific range you want to be in. 165 might be too high.
The temperature every 10 minutes or so. Now while that's going, I'm going to sanitize my carboy. Do not forget to sanitize this, and also the airlocks. Now once that's steep, lift your sack out of the water and do not squeeze it. Instead, you're going to take 4 cups of hot water and you're going to strain that through the bag and let it drain until it stops dripping. Then discard.
So he did a sparge over that, so that's just pouring water over the grains. Definitely a good option. I'm sure that's fine. I think there's a bit of a stigma about squeezing the bag. I'm not too worried about it myself. I'll squeeze the bag when I'm homebrewing, but do or don't, it's up to you. Just don't worry too much about that part.
Discard the grains and bring this liquid to a boil. Oh, and to that you're also going to want to add 5 pounds of Pilsen Light liquid malt extract.
There's the liquid malt extract that I was talking about earlier.
This sugary liquid is now known as the wort. Now, as soon as that comes to a boil, set your timer for 1 hour and toss in 1/2 ounce of Sriracha hops. And then you're just gonna let that bad boy continuously boil for that hour. Now, when 20 minutes remain out of that hour, we're gonna add a couple different spices, which will be 3 grams of grains of paradise, 10 grams of coriander, and 65 grams of peeled sliced fresh galangal, which is basically like ginger. You can also use ginger if you don't have galangal.
The spices are fun. They're definitely interesting and make it more of a creative project for a new homebrewer. I would say a bunch of spices aren't necessarily required to make a great Saison, but it's a fun, interesting project and definitely something that's an option. So all power to you.
Those in cheesecloth and tie it off with kitchen twine to make a bag, and then toss it in your boiling wort at the 20-minute mark. Then at the 10-minute mark, you're gonna add 1 ounce of Styrian Goldings hops, and then just finish out the boil with that 10 minutes remaining. Now once that 10 minutes is up, you need to let the wort cool down to 80 degrees Fahrenheit before you add the yeast. I usually like to do this by setting a little ice bath in my kitchen sink and plugging up my sink. Please be aware that at this point, the wort is in its most fragile state. You cannot let anything touch this that has not been totally sanitized. Once the wort...
That's a great point. Sanitation, once you start cooling, once that boil stops, you got to be very careful about sanitation. So I'm glad he stressed that. It's a good point. Water baths or ice baths are great. It's a little bit, if you could get an immersion chiller, is something like a coil that goes in the beer. It'll cool it faster. An ice bath works fine, you just have to be really careful. Also, he's got a great big sink. That's awesome. I've seen ice baths in bathtubs. So that's an option.
Before it reaches 80 degrees Fahrenheit, you can funnel it into your sanitized carboy using your sanitized funnel, then top it off with enough filtered water to reach the 5-gallon mark. Now at this point, a lot of brewers will check the specific gravity with a hydrometer so that they can determine its...
So it looks like he's doing not a full volume boil. So that's like 3 gallons of boiled wort and then topped up to 5 gallons total with distilled or boiled water. You just have to be careful about the sanitation of that water as well. Totally viable option. It's makes it a lot easier if you don't have an 8-10 gallon stock pot, is to put all your sugars for a full recipe into a smaller pot and then top up with distilled or sanitary water.
Alcohol content at the end. Now it's recommended but not a requirement, and you will just follow the instructions to take the reading, which if you do the specific gravity should be around 1.050. Now my liquid yeast is ready because it's been sitting out. I already gave it a good pop on the bottom. So make sure you sanitize the bag and sanitize a pair of scissors and then cut open a little end of it and then pitch it directly into your beer. Then add your prepared airlock and its stopper. Make sure that it's fully locked down on your carboy. Then
I love how much he's stressing sanitation. That's great. He's right, you don't need a hydrometer. You don't need to know the alcohol percentage of your beer, and especially with a kit or something, if you see that it's pre-prepared, it's going to be fine. But just make sure you give it plenty of time to ferment all the way out, because if you bottle beer that isn't done fermenting, you can end up with bottle bombs that can be really dangerous. That's when there's too much sugar left in and they overcarbonate in a sealed container. The pressure inside becomes too great and that glass can explode and send shards of glass everywhere. So you don't need a hydrometer, just let it go a long time. Let it ferment all the way out.
Let it ferment at room temperature in a dark area with no sunlight for 14 days. Make sure that there's no sunlight at all.
Oh hey, so you might be wondering why you're in my room right now next to my bed in a beer video. Weird, yeah, it's weird. So, we're in my room because of this. Well, not this, but what it's hiding. What I'm doing here is I'm blocking the light so that this stays in the darkness. So this whole weird bit was basically just to make a point about that. So yeah, keep your beer out of the light. Thank you very much.
After the first few...
Fun bit, fun point, very important. Keep your beer out of the light. Let it ferment in a dark place, right?
days, you should notice a couple of things. A, your airlock is bubbling. You've got a foamy head on top, which is called krausen. And at the bottom, you'll notice the yeast cake and then some other gases to...
He's got a beautiful fermentation going there. Nice layering, good color. That's why I like plastic and glass fermenters for homebrewers, because I just love watching the fermentation go. It's beautiful. Stainless steel is a great upgrade, but you can't see through it.
Developing and lots of bubbles happening. These are all good signs, and just let it go for those 14 days as described. Now once you've hit that 14-day mark, it's time to bottle. Make sure that you're sanitizing your bottles and your bottle caps and your bottle capper, yes, everything. After that, make sure to prime all your bottles with priming sugar. I personally like to use conditioning tablets because they're just easy. These are just pure corn sugar. I'll do about 4 to 5 tabs per bottle. Now this is where you're gonna need an auto siphon and a bottle filler, both of which are, guess what, sanitized.
Very interesting that he is attaching his bottle filler directly to the auto siphon. I actually haven't seen that done before. Usually I use a bottling bucket. Most people I know transfer to a bottling bucket. It can be a source of additional oxygen, so maybe this is a really good route if you're bottling something. If it worked for him, then great. I like to do corn sugar into the entire liquid. I feel that carbonation drops can be a little inconsistent, especially if you're using different sized bottles. But overall, I mean, it looked like he had good head on the beer and good carbonation, so I think that if it worked for him, I mean, carbonation drops are super popular. A ton of people use them, and they usually work. It might take a little bit more dialing in. If you use a calculator and add corn sugar into the whole batch of wort, you might get a more consistent product, but you also risk oxidation.
Surprised by that? Probably not. Now to fill my bottles, I attach my racking cane to a siphon and then the other end to a bottle filler. You want to carefully place your siphon in your beer, but whatever you do, do not touch the bottom or siphon any of that yeast cake at the bottom. That's the trub. It's very yucky. Don't get it. Carefully pump your beer through the siphon and press down on the bottom of a beer bottle to get it to start filling. Gravity should sort of do the rest for you. Then fill your bottle all the way up to the top and pull your siphon out. You should notice the liquid drop to a good spot. Some of these bottles of mine were actually underfilled, so yeah, don't do that. Repeat.
Yeah, so he said it himself. He said the right thing. Fill it to the top and then pull it out and it'll be at the right level. Looked like he was filling it to the right level, pulling it out, and it dropped a little too low. But not the end of the world.
With all your bottles, then using a bottle capper, cap your bottles. You know, it's fun. Even better if you have a buddy helping you like my boy Chris from the restaurant I used to work at. Once you're done, place these bottles back in that dark place, put them in some sort of a box in case one explodes, and let them bottle condition at room temperature for 3 weeks. Make sure that they're all capped, by the way, if I didn't clarify that enough. After those 3 weeks are up, make some room in your fridge because these boys are gonna wreak havoc on the space in there. Stock your chili boy with beers and let them get nice and cold for at least 24 hours.
Oh my god. Okay. I know the frig is open. There.
I think it's a great point. Definitely make sure you get these cold for at least 24 hours. It's really going to help keep the carbonation in that cold liquid. It's going to dissolve into it as opposed to all being let out when you open the beer. If you open a beer that's been sitting bottle conditioning for 3 weeks, you pop it open at room temperature, it's going to gush. It's just going to, all the beer is going to come out. None of the CO2 is going to stay in solution. That's why it's crucial to have bottles sit cold for at least 24 hours.
After that, I would recommend using a bottle opener to pour and then drink the beer that you made. Enjoy it, and don't forget to flex on your friends because you made this and you should be proud. But you know what makes me proud? B-roll.
Like I said, king of B-roll.
So I'm editing the video right now and it has occurred to me that I never actually explained why I got into brewing beer when I don't even like it. There really is such a thing as a beer out there that is for you. And the problem is brewers aren't making beer for you. They're making it for them. For what they like, for what they think other people will like, but that doesn't mean that you're gonna like it. So the beauty of brewing your own beer is, well, that you get to make it however you flippin' want, dude.
Alright guys, and that is it. So,
Love that sentiment. Definitely, I think everyone should try brewing at least a beer and try and brew something they think they'll like. So, go for it.
let's make this one quick because I had to drink a lot of beer to film this and I'm really feeling it right now. Okay, I still have more to film before I get drunk. If you're a beer lover, then that's a no-brainer. But if you don't like beer, but you like a fun kitchen project, beer brewing is a perfect candidate. Once you have that level of control, and you guys know how I feel about having the control over everything in food. And it's so fun. Now, around the time that you might be watching this, I'm probably getting all prepared to go to San Francisco to film a very special group of people for a very special night video. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. That's all in the links in the description. Please, it's much appreciated. Don't forget to DM me all the stuff that you're making. And with all that said, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time. I'm kind of trying to learn how to close this without hitting the...
Wait, one more thing that I forgot to say. Struggling with this edit, I'm sorry. But just want to say a massive thank you to Fabrizio on Instagram. This guy's a beer brewer that's based in Europe, and he has been giving me a shit ton of tips and tricks and has been sort of guiding me as I've done this. And he just gave me some killer tips that made making this guide so much more valuable. We thank him. Fabrizio, we love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Thank you, Joshua. That's a great video. I'm glad that it all worked out and it looked like you had a really good beer on your hands. I'm brand new to YouTube. Your content, again, I think is awesome. So thank you for that. If you guys want to check out more beer and brewing content, there's things I'll link, brew days, everything from beginner to intermediate, and beyond. We've got a series on things about beer all people should know that you can check out. For more on beer and brewing, come check out Prost with Peter, and thank you guys for watching. Prost. Woo!